And we'll pull up this.
All right, there we go. Charles, take it away.
All right, everybody. Welcome to our public safety drone review. It's the monthly look at what's happening in the world of public safety drones, new technology, new rules and regulations, issues, trends, problems, you name it, we're going to talk about it. My name is Charles Werner. I'm the director and founder of Drone Responders. And I'm just going to give a couple teasers, if you will. In the next week, March 14th and 15th, we will be having the Drone Responders National Public Safety UAS Conference in Busch Gardens in Williamsburg, Virginia. There's still a chance that you can register if you're interested, and it's going to be exciting because we have this great fest house they use for the Oktoberfest. It's going to be all hours for the event. We have about a 50-foot screen to be showing video on, and we have the Nevermore haunted house to fly indoor, which I know Blake will be interested to hear about, so his team's going to be there to fly the new Lemur 3 haunted house. So we're looking for lots of fun. We've got some other teasers. There's some good news coming out about some new regulations that we've had some success with the FAA and some new technology advances for DFR. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Miriam, and I'm going to drop out of sight. Miriam?
All right. Thanks so much, Charles. As always, welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this episode of the Public Safety Drone Review. I'm Miriam McNabb, editor of Drone Life. My co-host is Mr. Timothy Martin, a veteran law enforcement officer, more than 25 years in the field, and the current director of UAS training with the Los Angeles County Regional Training Center. Tim, you are joining us live from the Texas Public Safety Robotics Summit. How's that going?
It is going fantastic. It's a great event. If you've never been, it's on a several 100-acre ranch, farmland with everything you could imagine. You've got lakes and quarries for underwater robotics and ground robots, and mostly it's focused on aerial drone flight, and vendors from everybody that's in the public safety industry. About 400 attendees, and it's been great. The regional training center has been holding training iterations throughout the event, so we're getting our hands dirty on. Really, it's a playground for us that live in the city. Come out here in this open land where you have terrain and open space to fly. So it's a great event. If you've never been, I highly recommend. It's Granite Defense is the one that puts it on at the Reveille Peak Ranch.
Great. All right. Well, if we lose him briefly, we know why, because he is in the middle of a ranch in Texas. I'd also like to introduce our guests. We are really honored to have with us today the heads of two very innovative companies serving the public safety community. We've got Blake Resnick, the founder and CEO at Brinc Drones, maker of the Lemur and the newly released Lemur 2 aircraft for first response and SWAT operations. We are excited to hear more about the new drone later. We also have Eric Brock, CEO of Avoidance Holdings, the company behind American Robotics, Automated Drone Solutions, and the Airobotics family of products. And Eric will be talking about a really exciting recent deployment of the Airobotics drone-in-a-box solution as DFR overseas. So thank you both so much for joining us. Finally, full disclosure, Brinc Drones are a Drone Life sponsor, for which we are very, very grateful. But as always, this is not a sponsored or paid appearance. We don't charge anyone or pay anyone to participate, but we invite the guests we think you'd like to see that have important insights for the public safety community. If you know of someone you'd like to see on the webcast, please reach out, send me an email to miriam@dronelife.com. We will certainly consider all suggestions.
And
right.
if you're listening and you have questions for the guests or Miriam and I, just throw it in the Q&A, and I'll be monitoring that and make sure that we try to get to all the questions that are asked about the panelists' products and what they're doing in the field.
Great. So let's get right into it and start out by discussing a few of the kind of current news stories that are floating around today. I sort of drew ones that I thought had sort of a point to make about the way things go with the public safety community. So the first couple are based around firefighting. First, we've got drones helping firefighters battle blaze in the Bronx. And I thought that was really interesting because we've seen firefighting drones out in California, out on the West Coast dealing with wildfires all over the country, but I haven't yet seen a news story that said, hey, we're using firefighting drones in an urban environment, in a cluttered urban environment. So I think that's really interesting. And I mean, Tim, you guys, I would imagine that this is somewhat similar to using a law enforcement drone in an urban environment. You need the same kind of waivers and permissions and whatever.
Yeah, that doesn't change and a lot of times you have cities that will share waivers. You'll have law enforcement agencies or fire agencies will work off of the same or the same waivers because they work for the same. And this article you're talking about, I don't know if we can put links in the comments so they can look at the articles, but it's great thermal video of a fire in New York. And New York Fire is one of the pioneers, along with LA Fire, but New York Fire, NYPD, they have impressive drone programs where they're able to get these aircraft up in firefighting. One of the problems that we run into in smaller agencies is you have a fire engine crew, maybe 3 or 4 on the engine, and everyone's got you get a structure fire. No one has the time or ability to jump out and put a drone up because they're limited on personnel. So generally these bigger agencies that have full-time drone units have the advantage to deploy them on these larger fires like this one.
Yeah. All right. Well, hopefully we get, enough collaboration going throughout the public safety community so even smaller organizations can leverage kind of drone technology between departments, maybe. The second firefighting story that we have, this is kind of an eternal favorite of mine. I write a lot about the eVTOL space just because it's so fascinating, and I absolutely cannot wait for passenger drones. But in Mumbai, they're talking about using eVTOL, so sort of a tiny helicopter, if you will, shaped drone to do firefighting for high-rise buildings. Obviously, overseas, this is super critical, but also here. So any thoughts on that? I'm not sure when we'll be able to see that. I would assume that there's kind of regulations about carrying chemical that may affect it. What do you think?
Yeah, there's actually there's already companies that are doing that. We had a demo out at the training center of a firefighting drone, and it had both a very large canister on the bottom that would spray fire retardant or a powder like a fire extinguisher, if you will. Had a big long snout, and then the interesting thing to me was that I could see that for certain situations where you don't want to get personnel too close to it, but they also had the ability to attach an actual 2-inch fire hose to the drone, and as long as the hose can go, the drone would essentially be tethered by the water line, and they would be able to reach the higher buildings. I'm not so sure they could do high rises with that method, but it was pretty impressive to see this very large platform with the fire hose tethered to it. So I would imagine what you're seeing in these in Mumbai and other areas is already being done and already in the United States as prototypes and being tested. But you run into the issue of power is one of the biggest things. Is how do you keep the drone airborne long enough to be effective in putting those fires out? And so in addition to the fire hose tether, now you got to tether power so that you have that unlimited flight. So that's one of the challenges.
All right.
Yeah, that's fascinating. So is the thought basically that a person would get into this vehicle, like carry up a fire hose, like while they're manning the drone and then fight a fire?
They're unmanned vehicles. So the idea is that the vehicle itself carries whatever the payload is, whether, as Tim says, that's a hose or, fire retardant or some kind of chemical payload or something. But I guess, right, shoots laterally instead of down.
Yeah. So the actual nozzle could be articulated, just like a camera would be articulated, and you could actually gimbalize the fire hose to where you're either spraying out at a down or up angle, depending on the situation. So it's pretty cool stuff. Just like we're developing drones in law enforcement, the fire industry is also paralleling in developing their own type of aircraft.
So maybe I can ask a question on this because it is interesting. So a city like Mumbai is vertical, right? And that's just a reality. So if you're running a fighting operation there, a solution like this is probably being integrated into the fire truck itself. I'm guessing, right? And that would be, sort of maybe tethered and have this ability to bring either, the fighting, solution up, or have the hose. But this would be kind of a permanent structure as part of a vehicle. Is that?
I don't think they are actually. So so that's a super interesting idea too. But then you're sort of, how high can you go if it's, well, obviously a tethered drone can go a long way, and that's a super interesting idea. Actually, EHang demonstrated this before as just a free flying vertical takeoff and landing unmanned drone equipped with a payload. So I think that they were going in conjunction with firefighters.
It says in the article that it can fly 18 floors, or 18 stories is the maximum. So the picture they have on it, I don't think is, so 18 floors
18
weigh,
stories, it's limited.
100 kilograms is the weight. So yeah, very, very interesting. And I've seen, Eric, to answer your question, I've seen video of multiple drones that will be stacked up, and they'll, the one will discharge the water that's in its tank, not a tethered system, but tanked water, and then it'll peel off. The next one will move in, and they'll hit it again. That one will peel off, and so forth.
Refill it.
You'll have multiple drones hitting the same fire. I can see that in the higher structures where you're not going to get up there with a hose very fast.
Okay.
Cool.
So if I could ask another, I didn't chime in when we talked about the Bronx example.
That we're gonna know.
is all right. So in the Bronx example, or what do you think the current status is from an in the field operations standpoint? Is that drone that was helping the firefighters in the Bronx, was that something that they brought to the scene, or was that something that had been piloted and arrived first, or what's how does that work? And
well, it could be a lot of agencies will share roles. You'll have fire that helps police out on calls when there's not police available, and you'll have police that help fire out. So I didn't see it in the article, but it specifically said it was New York Fire Department. They have, from what I understand, they have a full-time drone unit. So my guess is that if they arrived on scene, it was either right as the fire started or afterwards. But regardless, you really see it both ways. You see vehicle, drones being deployed out of the trunk of the car or the back of the fire engine after the fact, or in other cases you have like the DFR world where the drone is seeing the smoke before the 911 call even comes out, and they arrive on scene first. So that's the beauty of it is it fits into all those scenarios where the deployment could be effective before and after the incident.
All right. So we're going to move on to police drones. And this is, sorry, Charles is behind the scenes there, but he's the fire guy. We don't have you, so we're moving on to police drones. And there were a few interesting stories here. And one that I wanted to kind of talk about was there was a Virginia County Police Department saying drones are really a growing part of our operations. They're doing a lot of publicity about that. And interestingly, they're doing sort of monthly training flights out in the community. And I wanted to kind of contrast this because I think this is a topic facing public safety agencies all around the country, where cities and towns are maybe not as open to the idea of implementing public safety drones. They don't really understand what they're going to do. And so, there was another article that ran on a different channel that said, there were one department had these very expensive drones that had been grounded from the beginning of the program, basically based on fears of a negative public reaction. So, at Drone Life, this is something we are passionate about. We're always trying to say, this is not about surveillance. This is about de-escalation and protecting all parties involved and all of those things. But we're still, it's tough for some departments to work with that public opinion. So you've got on the one side a sort of failed investment really in great hardware. On the other side, seeing that the investment in being out in the community and talking about things is really worthwhile. So what do we
Hey, Miriam?
Yes.
I wanted to say it's really important what you said. And it's one of the most important things that we say about starting a program is do it with your community and your elected officials first, with your town hall meetings. We have an orientation and outreach program in the Drone Responders Resource Center that you can customize for your own, but it walks you through setting up that process. That's the first thing, because if you don't, you're going to pay later.
And I would guess, Blake and Eric, you probably have things to say about this. I mean, what's been your experience working with customers who are sort of worried about really like what people, not even what they're going to do, but what people are going to think?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I'd love to just reinforce what Charles mentioned. We think engagement with community members and with city councils and elected officials and all those stakeholders is an incredibly good idea when starting up one of these programs, because it is sometimes something that kind of has to be explained a little bit, how drones really can keep officers safe and suspects safe and just the general community safe. Without violating anyone's privacy. So, I mean, I think it's one of those things that is just fundamentally a public good, but it's a conversation that has to be had. So, yeah, we very much encourage our customers and partners to have those conversations. I think, go for it.
I mean, Eric, we were talking earlier about you're doing a lot of work overseas. So do you see sort of a difference in how communities look at this versus overseas? And I do want to say, if you search police drones, you come up with the vast majority are good stories. We found a little kid, we found a lost hiker, whatever. But go ahead, Eric.
Yeah, I mean, clearly public education in the way you do introduce these technologies is really important. And I guess if I gave us our example, and I think we'll get a chance to dig into the technology when we're deploying autonomous drones, our platform really is very effective for public safety, but it's also something that we've been working with in other industries, whether it's oil and gas, mining, construction management, things like that. And in all these use cases with our system, video and security and safety are integral, but we're also adding other functionalities around inspection because we have that flexibility. And so, we kind of get used to that from being in all these different sectors. Now, as it relates to specifically the public safety markets that we've entered, we have begun to deploy the Optimus system, which is the Airobotics autonomous platform in the UAE, specifically in Dubai, and it is used for homeland security, public safety by the authorities there. And it's a different environment, so it gets introduced and it's an urban setting. And I guess I would say that in a lot of ways, the way our system is being used, it is infrastructure. And there actually very quickly, appears to be very little awareness because we're doing, it's emergency response, it's patrols, but very very quickly the experience has been as it gets installed that people just don't even notice it, and that's a fascinating aspect. We've been doing this now for a while, and you really don't even see much public commentary on it. even on social media, you can see, if you wanted to get excited about it, you could, but we don't see that. Which is a little, I got to be candid. That's a little different. Certainly the intuition here of the public is, okay, let's be skeptical of government, and we know that why that is. But as we're talking about, and we can dig in more deeply, I think we've had experiences. I'll go back to when the toll roads started to have these digital tags, and all of a sudden, well, people say, well, I don't know if I want that, because then the government knows where I'm coming and going. But then, of course, very quickly, you realize, well, I have less traffic, so there's a good element of this. And I think similarly, we'll have these good stories, as Miriam, you're saying, where you pick up the newspaper and say, hey, this saves lives and makes people more comfortable, which is not intuitive when it's first introduced and someone sees the drone, because it's a bit intimidating. It's new.
And Blake, I was actually thinking about when he was talking about the word infrastructure, which is very different because it's sort of public, outside, on the street kind of thing, whereas the lemur drone is really designed for kind of an indoor engagement where the public is not around. This is not really about sort of going to a public event. This is either you're doing rescue after a big emergency that everybody knows about and really wants to. I mean, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I mean, it is fundamentally different, right? Like when our drones are deployed, normally the entire block is cordoned off.
Nobody's getting close to that operation.
There'll be patrol elements that sort of secure a perimeter, and then SWAT and everything else is operating inside of that. Especially at larger departments that have a lot of resources, like the one where LVMPD, where we really developed the first version of Lemur. People were not nearby these houses or sites at all. And also, most of the time when our drones are flying around, they are flying around indoors. So even if you did happen to be outside of this house where it might be operating, like, you still probably wouldn't see the drone.
Right.
And I think, the other element here that also changes the situation a little bit for us is, these where lemurs deployed, these are situations that, are usually fairly intense. Like, for a SWAT team to be called out, there are clear risks involved to whatever situation is being dealt with. And I just think that it's just fundamentally a different situation to something like DFR that's operating 24/7 every day over a city, where it's kind of more part of daily life. Where Lemur operates, it's pretty far from your normal day-to-day.
I think in a way that makes it almost more difficult for you, because people can't experience it and understand what it's there for necessarily, because they're never part of that engagement.
No, that's definitely an interesting point. I think similarly, though, we've never really experienced that much pushback to Lemur. I think people intuitively understand that if a SWAT team is responding to, a really high risk event, they need tools to make their job safer. And, it's far enough away from like normal day-to-day activity that I think people are like, yeah, it makes sense. Like, I'm not worried about this being a big privacy violation.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's interesting, Miriam, that when you look at agencies that have gone public with the Desire to Start a program and they've surveyed their agencies, what Blake just said is true, that the communities are comfortable with that known danger of having officers go into buildings or go into houses and the dangers they face, and they're okay with having a drone go in there and take that role. It's always find missing people, indoor tactical SWAT situations. Those are the top two that the public is really comfortable with. So it really makes it easy to accept that, as opposed to a high altitude law enforcement drone per se.
Yeah, I think to add to that, the important part is making reassurances to the community that you're not doing random surveillance. That's the big.
Yep. We don't use the word surveillance anymore because it just leads to all kinds of misunderstandings. Yeah.
does.
Well, I mean, a lot of this is on the policy side too. How departments and cities decide they want to deploy these types of technologies matters quite a lot.
Absolutely. And I do think that it's critical from what I've heard in my community and you guys tell me what you think about this. But when I talk to people, I say, you want to emphasize when you're talking to people, you don't need specific laws about drones. Because naming a specific technology really ensures that you're going to be outdated very quickly. And you already have laws that say that you have to protect people's privacy and you have to protect people's personal space, and you have all of these laws and regulations in place about how you interact with the community around you. So you don't need special ones. You've had long range cameras and binoculars for a long time. So really just introducing a new tool does not necessarily require new regulations specific to the tool. So I think communities really need to bring that in and think about it there, because they've already done a very good job of protecting the communities.
Mhm.
All right, so let's gonna move on, because I want to make sure that we have enough time to sort of dive into our guest topics here. So I know the World Police Summit is actually taking place in Dubai right now. And interestingly to me, when I look at that program, there's 6 specific tracks at the World Police Summit. There's forensics and things like that. And drones are one of the 6 tracks, which really kind of speaks to sort of global importance and prominence of the technology kind of in the public safety community. So I want to talk a little bit about whether or not we think that the rest of the world is sort of more on board with this, maybe than all of the communities, if we're all sort of growing together at the same rate, or depends on the application. What do you think?
Well, why don't I take a first stab? And Miriam, you make a great point about the focus and the prominence of drones at an event like this World Police Summit. And quite clearly, this is an event that has global interest, right? People are coming from all over the world, from public safety perspective, and everyone's looking and thinking about it and trying to understand the technology, understand how they adopt it. But I think there's, like a lot of technologies, there's always going to be the early adopters, and the early adopters are going to do the hard work and in both validating the technology, but also doing the difficult work to shape the public acceptance of this. And I think there's very little doubt, if you've been spending a lot of time in like the folks who are joining us today, who probably are, that this is the future, right? The drone is way too valuable in various forms, whether it's what we're doing or what Blake and Brinc are doing, way too valuable not to be that technology being harnessed and used. However, it is new, and there's not just sort of the privacy issues, but there's also the validation of the technology itself, that it's safe and can be used productively. So so folks can come there, and then what I think we find with a lot of technologies is the curve of adoption is actually quite people tend to think of it linearly, and I used to be an investor, and so I'll give you an example. If you're going to be building a restaurant chain, right, you'll do 2 this year, 4 next year, 6 the following year. However, technology curves are not like that. And as people get comfortable that the requirements of the technology has been validated, the curves are exponential. But it does take the early adopters always to sort of demonstrate that the technology is scalable. So I think that's what we're seeing, and I think people coming to the World Police Summit is a great example of the interest and the prominence. I think that was a great word that you used.
And Blake, are you seeing more interest kind of internationally? You and I wish we had an hour and a half to talk about this, but I recently got to speak with Blake about their their deployment to Turkey to do search and rescue after the earthquake. Please read about it on Drone Life or wherever else you can find it. I think much more prominent news outlets than mine did stories on that. But as you bring the lemur around the world, you've been in Ukraine, you've been in Turkey. Are you seeing sort of much, more acceptance?
Oh yeah. I mean, I think when we go and respond to those types of events, the first responders on the ground are just unbelievably grateful to have more tools that they can deploy to try to save lives.
Yeah.
So like overwhelmingly, that's the response when we arrive. They're just really happy for us to be there. And yeah, I definitely think that many places around the world, are as interested in drones, if not more so than the United States. And the other element here that's interesting and affects things is different countries have different drone laws, different laws around BVLOS and multi-vehicle operations and nighttime operations and all these things. And that might make them even more equipped to start taking on these, more advanced drone operations than the United States is. So, yeah, absolutely. I mean, in our charitable work and in the locations that you mentioned, I think we found a lot of acceptance and interest in working with us and utilizing the benefits that drones provide in general. And I think taking kind of a more macro scale look at this, it's very possible that in the future drones take off, much more in some other markets, especially the big autonomous functions, than in the United States. So yeah, it'll be fascinating to watch.
And so I think that's kind of our segue there, Eric, because we're talking about the deployment of autonomous drone-in-the-box solutions as first responders in Dubai. We have a couple of questions that have come up in the Q&A. So I'm going to address, there's a question actually for each of you. Paul will get to your question with Blake when he's talking about the lemur too, because it's a good question. Eric, with all the news recently about train derailments, have you been approached about incorporating an Ondas network and wayside radios?
I've got some investors here who want me to break news, and this is a little. So yeah. So just I want to be brief. We've got at Ondas two businesses. We've got a wireless network platform that addresses railroad private networks and there's safety technologies that have to be connected to private networks. But of course, the drone is also used as an inspection tool, whether it's rail yards or even the cars themselves. So I'll just say briefly that we do believe we're part of the ecosystem in and around adopting safety technologies. And it's certainly true on the network side, and I think the drone side as well. So let me leave it at that.
All right, let's not get Eric arrested. Okay, that sounds good. So, if you could please describe the deployment of these large drone-in-the-box solutions, and they are large, correct? I remember seeing the Airobotics solution in person at different shows. We're talking about a piece of infrastructure here.
It's absolutely infrastructure. Just very quickly, what is a drone in a box? I mean, the drone itself, everyone knows what a UAV is. The drone in a box is an autonomous platform, and the box itself is really a docking station. There's a lot more going on than just a box. And what's particularly unique about what we're bringing to the market with Airobotics and the Optimus system is that our docking station is incredibly sophisticated. We've got robotic technology inside the docking station where we can swap batteries and swap payloads, and the payloads are mature. So what the battery swapping does, it means we can operate our drones essentially 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. When the drone will do a mission, it'll come back, it lands itself, which is no small feat, and we can do that reliably and safely, and we've demonstrated that, which is why we're now deploying fleets of again, the infrastructure. We're also able to swap payloads. So if you want a video payload, we've got that, and obviously that's a critical part of the public safety. You can have thermal video, but there's also other sensors around imagery that we can deploy. So the infrastructure itself if you deploy it primarily for public safety, it's also got the ability to, if you've got time and you want to do inspection of critical assets as a city or municipality, you can. So Miriam, you're right. It is infrastructure, and we're working with customers in Dubai now, Abu Dhabi, and we see other demand elsewhere. Similarly, to install the infrastructure so you get citywide coverage. And but public safety is an incredibly valuable use case as part of that infrastructure.
So Eric, why Dubai? What is the attraction? Is it regulation, regulatory? Do they have similar laws as the United States? It's interesting to hear how that came about.
Yeah, so a couple of things. I think I'd say firstly, the regulations in the UAE are very serious. Safety is critical, so there's no cutting corners at all. I think that what has turned out is, so again, a little history. Airobotics is in Israel, and of course now they're an American company because they've joined Ondas. So that opens up a lot of the world because we can bring resources globally to bring the system to more places. But for Airobotics, starting in the UAE was good because it was closer, firstly, but just quite frankly, the UAE is very innovative. Right, they want to be on the leading edge of these technologies. They gear their economy around technology as they're diversifying. So it was really a great place, and I would say that's the case for not just us, but the drone economy in general. So it's a place where a lot of things happen. Now, as it relates to regulations, I think it is clear that the U.S. is much bigger, right? And there's different risks when it comes to airspace. It's a lot more complex. So bringing our system here, which we have plans to do, and we're working now, and I'm sure it's calls like this will help us build relationships and awareness of what we can do, and hopefully the ecosystem. But that's the answer, Tim. We're able to do that in the UAE because they wanted to work with us and partner. And we were saying earlier, as Miriam was talking about, the intuitive response to the public is one where you have to get over that if you're a police department or urban environment that wants to start working on this. And I think we can, but the UAE was really a great place to prove what we're doing. And I think as we're proving the safety and reliability, we can talk more about how we're doing on that front, that there's going to be increasing comfort for us to bring it into urban environments here in the US.
And how many installations are we talking about within the city? So about how far apart are these boxes, drone installations, whatever you want to call them?
So to get citywide coverage, the way they plot this is, okay, we're going to put this, this infrastructure, and we're going to install it in a certain place, and we can get a 30-mile plus area of coverage around the base or the docking station. And based on that, the city will determine, how densely deployed the drone infrastructure will be. In the case of Dubai, you've seen the authorities there publicly say they're going to deploy 24 systems across the city, and we think that is just getting started. Once you do that, and again, the versatility of the platform around safety and security, but also the inspection and benefits, that entails, we think it can get even broader, more dense at the same time deployments. But that's a good start. That's just one city.
So can you describe can you walk us through how the dynamics of the system work? Is there a human that's listening to a radio call and pushes a button to launch the drone and types in an address, or is it more of an autonomous response based on algorithms in a computer system? How's it working?
So great question. And again, it's a fully autonomous system. Nobody touches it. Nobody touches the battery. Nobody touches the payload, and we don't have visual observers. So the system is managed from a central command center. And the flights we have are all architected, geofenced, and planned in advance, and they're regularly flown. Now, when in the case of an emergency response, that you can call on demand an operation or a mission. And if you need to do something specific to the drone, you can take control and sort of direct it to, sort of give you a better angle to understand what's going on in terms of, developing the situational awareness. So the platform itself is autonomous. Generally speaking, these are planned operations. but there's a lot of flexibility in how the authorities can control it.
So during these planned operations, what is the aircraft payload detecting? Is it just up in the air in case a call comes out or a situation comes out, or is it actually looking for example, a shot spotter? Not that gun violence is big there, but for instance, if you had a technology of like a shot spotter where the aircraft is proactively flying, it detects gunshots. Will it focus on that area, or what exactly is that flight path?
So we haven't integrated that technology yet, but that's something that quite clearly can be integrated. And of all the difficult things we do, that wouldn't be the hardest. So the authorities, they have basic requirements that they've outlined, and that's how we help them plan the missions. But like I said, if there's a specific need to respond to an emergency, that's what they do. So we're having what you'll see in practice here today is there's not a need to have the drone necessarily fly 24 hours a day. That capability is there. But there'll be a number of missions through the day, and that can vary.
And real quick, just because we're running out of time here, there was one point that came up today that I wanted to address. So Airobotics has just purchased Iron Drones, CUAS solutions. So are you now sort of integrating counter drone technology
We are.
in the Airobotics family there?
Yeah, so just very quickly in the counter drone market, there's really two principal systems you can have to counter drones. You can jam the command and control link or the GPS, or you can intercept and capture the drone. What we find in the civil world, if you're protecting, say, a stadium or a sensitive asset like a power plant or a government facility, you really can't, or even say if it's an oil facility, right? It's something where again, valuable site you want to protect. You can't jam, right? That's more of a military specific use case, because when you jam the signal, you're affecting all the civil operations. So at an airport, for example, you can't jam signals very easily because it runs risk of jamming signals that people rely on to operate the airport. So what we're doing with Iron Drone and what we call the Raider is an intercept. It's a module, so it's a container, has 3 small UAS. It's fully autonomous, and when there's a threat of a hostile drone is identified, we can send one or multiple out, and that drone will move at a very high speed, approach a drone, intercept. It's got a video camera on, so you have situational awareness. And then if the drone is deemed to be hostile, we can take the drone down, and we do that with a net. The net has a parachute, so you can take the drone. Again, in a public space, you're able to neutralize a threat, but also to have the drone come down in a way that people aren't going to get injured, property or individuals.
Yeah, I highly
Takes
encourage
a drone to catch a drone.
Yeah, I encourage anybody that if you just look up Iron Drones, they've got some pretty good video of the footage of that, and it kind of reminds me of going back to the airspace days where they were shooting nets from both a cannon and air to air from a drone. But you guys added or Iron Drone added the parachute, which is a huge difference in that is controlling the descent for obvious reasons. So that's exciting. And that's a company that's up and running now, right?
Yeah,
They're operational.
Yeah, we folded that in about 6 months ago. We formally announced that we had closed an acquisition there, but they've got a product that customers are expressing great interest in.
So I want to move on to the new Lemur drone. So from huge installations to a drone designed for an indoor operation, we have the Lemur. And Blake, I've been privileged to speak with you several times and to see the Lemur, both 1 and 2. One of the really fascinating things about the Lemur is that it is so purpose built for this system. Lemur 2 has a ton of new functionality. Let's just start with the sensor array, because if you look at the front of the lemur, it is equipped with everything. Go ahead, start there.
Yeah, no, it's a huge upgrade, that's for sure. So yeah, looking at the front of Lemur 2, far on one side, basically we have a full-blown time of flight LiDAR system. So as a drone is flying around, it's projecting different patterns of laser light on the surfaces it gets near. And then it's measuring effectively using the speed of light, how long it takes for one of those pulses to be emitted, reflect off of the surface, come back into the receptor of the module. And it's generating these really rich, dense point clouds of its nearby environment as it's flying around. So we do a couple of things with that. Number one, we display it to users. So they can consume this either as full 3D maps, full 3D point clouds, or we have basically a mode of this that will take sort of like a cake slice of that full 3D map and then display it as a floor plan. So as you're flying around, it's actually generating a 2D floor plan of the structure that you're inside.
And sorry, I didn't position this correctly. Just for anybody who doesn't know, and I don't know where you've been if you don't, but the lemur is designed specifically to go in for a SWAT operation. So you are going into a house, you're trying to clear that house for the officers involved, establish communications with the suspect, try to de-escalate that situation. Sorry, just wanted to make sure people knew. So if you've got a floor plan of the building that you are clearing, incredibly valuable.
No, that's really well said. One other cool thing about this is it's being displayed on board our handheld controller, so the pilot can see it. But we're actually also streaming all of that to our new web app, Brinc Live Ops. So every single member of a SWAT team or any other team that wants to consume that data, they go on their phones or their laptop, go to brincdrones.com, and they can see the floor plans that's coming off the aircraft. So yeah, very excited about that. That's the first thing it does. The second thing it does is obstacle awareness. So other drones have obstacle avoidance systems, and we've always been a fan of this because it prevents drones from crashing. The problem, though, is that it also frequently prevents drones from actually exploring confined environments. Flying through a window or flying through a rubble pile, which is a problem because that's pretty much all our drone does. So we've taken a slightly different approach. Basically, instead of the drone stopping you completely from exploring an area that might be close to obstacles, it just slows you down a lot. So prevents you from crashing at high speed, but still allows you to kind of get where you want. That also relies on our LiDAR sensor. And then the final thing is GPS denied zero light position hold. We're generating these big maps. Those can be used to teach the drone where it is in the world. This is enabling a function where you can just take your hands off the sticks and the drone will stay in that position for any amount of time, regardless of whether or not you have GPS or light. So yeah, all of that is the LiDAR. Right under that, we have a visual tracking camera. That's kind of the next sensor. That is a machine vision camera. It's taking big frames of whatever is around the drone. It's using AI and ML to pick out a bunch of tracking points. And then it's using conventional computer vision to track those points frame to frame. And then it fuses all of that with our IMU. So this, in conjunction with sort of an autonomy illuminator on the other side of the drone, which isn't very visible to the human eye, but is very visible to the camera. This is all what's sort of teaching the drone where it is and enabling all of our pilot assistance. So that's what's going on there. Also on the other side of the drone, we have a microphone and a speaker system. So, Lemur was first drone in the world with a two-way audio function, enabled through cellular. That's a feature we've retained on Lemur 2, so you can use it like a flying cell phone. So that's kind of what's on either side of the aircraft, on either flank. And then in the middle, kind of our core camera and sensor payload, we have 4 different modules. So the first is a 4K image sensor with digital zoom. And now we're transmitting back full digital HD video back to your handheld controller. So it's a much cleaner picture than Lemur S. We have a FLIR Lepton thermal imager. So if someone's hiding under some blankets, for example, you can tell there's a person there. And then we have two lights, one visible white light, which also has a strobe function for night vision. And then under that, a night vision illuminator, which isn't very visible to the human eye, but is again very visible to the camera and allows you to see in kind of a grayscale night vision mode. And then the whole thing can basically gimbal a full 180 degrees. So it can look straight up, it can look straight down, pretty much anywhere in between. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of what's going on with sensors.
And so I spoke to one of the users of the lemur, and they were commenting, sort of comparing the ground robotics, which are traditionally used in SWAT operations, have been used that way for a long time. Of course, the lemur, it wouldn't be a demonstration if we didn't break some glass. It's equipped with a glass breaker. It can go through the window, but also really the big difference is, when you clear a room with ground robotics, you can't necessarily guarantee someone's not hiding in the bathtub or, up above a certain level there. So significant advantage.
Yeah, we find there are a couple of challenges with ground robotics. Number one, they're just big, heavy, and slow. So there are a lot of situations, like we find this in motels sometimes with staircases that kind of double back on themselves in tight ways. Sometimes they just get stuck and they can't be deployed at all into an apartment or a house where they kind of have to explore. So that's kind of the first issue. If they can explore a structure, frequently it takes hours for them to clear rooms. So they're just so huge and cumbersome. It's really hard to operate. Also, for some reason during SWAT callouts, there's almost always trash all over the floor. Like there's something about like I don't know, maybe the type of person that ultimately gets themselves
intensity of the situation.
Yeah, they don't keep their houses clean. So another thing I've seen a lot when I first started going on SWAT callouts, and I've heard from our customers is, robots, they ingest stuff into their tracks and then they get stuck. So even if they were able to clear the first two rooms, maybe they've gotten a lot of stuff in there and then they just can't move around anymore. And then, as you said, there are situations where they just can't articulate a camera where they need it inside of a bathtub or similar. So
right.
There are just a lot of advantages to like a flying platform. There are some disadvantages too. We can't reach doors, for example.
Well,
that's
Blake,
yeah.
Congratulations.
Tim, you're cutting out there.
Yeah, that's fine. My reception's not great right now.
Well, I definitely, sorry, Tim, come back when you can see you're clear, or put it in the comments. But I know there were a couple things that I thought were really fascinating. One, in talking to users, because fortunately I haven't been involved in a SWAT operation myself, but to come in like attics, you got to be able to look up into the attic. So that new feature where the the payload can articulate up is very, very functional from that respect. And I think also if somebody has not seen the lemur, both versions, right, they're incredibly, I've heard you tell the story about the police officer coming in and swatting the drone with a towel and saying, yeah, somebody's going to do that in 5 seconds. The drone has to be able to basically turn itself over and bounce back up. So very critical. Because you are an indoor operation, and now you have these new sensors, and the controller is a full computer. How do you deal with connections? How do you ensure that you've got a connection there?
Yeah, it's a good question. This is another feature we're really proud of. So one of the big challenges with indoor drones it's just really hard to get a signal from an aircraft to a controller through a dozen concrete walls.
Yeah, that's
extremely hard. There are some things you can do, lower frequencies on your RF link and higher powers and directional antennas, and like all of those things help, but it's almost always still a problem. So this is something we wanted to make better with Lemur 2. And we did that by implementing a mesh networking system. So now drones act as mesh networking nodes, handheld controllers act as mesh networking nodes, and even body-worn radios can act as mesh networking nodes. So you think about, a huge commercial building. What you can do with Lemur 2 is take one bird, fly it inside, a third of the way through the structure, land it, perch it. That is then repeating your signal. You can take another aircraft and then clear the whole thing. So it's a very important feature, especially thinking about, as I said, missions in these big commercial structures, but also missions that occur underground, or missions that occur in partially collapsed buildings. This is sort of a game-changing capability.
So I want to address, we do have a question here from the audience. Do you see an expansion into hazardous materials response with the Lemur? Have you looked into other sensors for it, i.e. gas detection?
Yeah, no, I'm really glad we got this question. So on Lemur S, we had a Picatinny rail underneath the drone. It had high power and it had one PWM channel, so like one control input. That was great for carrying a glass breaker or a dropper or a light. But what it didn't enable was us to carry additional sensors because we could only send data out of this thing. We couldn't actually receive any data. That's changed with Lemur 2. So now our Picatinny rail, it has PWM, it has high power, but it's also literally a USB cable. It's like a normal USB interface. So what's cool about this is it will enable us to carry a tri-gas sensor. It'll enable us to carry a Geiger counter, any of that kind of stuff. And that is coming. So Lemur 2, as it stands, can carry like a wide array of sensors. And we are now beginning to work on some integrations. So yeah, to answer the question, yes, we are extremely excited about that. Lemur 2 is capable of carrying those sensors without any hardware changes. And we're working on those new accessories.
That's great. Tim, are you back with us or should I?
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. So Blake, congratulations. You guys checked every box, and it's good to see, obviously we're coming into the second generation of drones, specifically built for law enforcement on all fronts. And, you guys listening to us out here working the field and the trainers and everything of the needs. That's fantastic because, unfortunately there is no one magic drone that will do everything we need it to do out there. And I think there's always going to be a need for an autonomous flight and then a manual flight. And then of course your indoor flights. That's probably one of the more important ones. So congratulations.
Can I ask a question?
Thank you.
So I wanted to say first, Blake, thanks for the support of the Surf Outside collapse and the work that you did there as well. That was really appreciated. And I know you're looking at other places where you can go in and help during emergencies. Any other expansions that you're looking at this next year that you might want to share?
Honestly, right now we're just very focused on Lemur 2. Yeah, so demos for us start in about a month. So they'll start like early April. And then customer deliveries will begin in Q3. So we're extremely focused on just building the early units, getting that to our team so we can actually show the drone to, the agencies that are interested, and then spooling up manufacturing so we can meet demand. I would say probably like the next big product release is it's likely those hazmat sensors, actually.
So just to let you know, we had another comment from the audience saying, yes, I would like to see that as well, the hazardous materials response sensors. So another vote.
Yeah, we're excited about it. Soon as we can, we'll get that out.
And I also wanted to, there are so many features with this, when I was writing about it, and I had, as I mentioned, had the opportunity to talk to customers who just said, they just implemented everything we asked for. So the controller is a touch screen, but you can touch it with tactical gloves and it works that way. So this is, details. Yeah. But what is your favorite feature or one that I, didn't come up yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. Well, it's NDA compliant. That's honestly a big one for us. And very hard to pull off because the entire global supply chain for drones is really based out of Shenzhen. So
Yeah.
we've had to engineer a lot of components ourselves that before we would just buy off the shelf. So yeah, that is definitely a major feature.
So are you proceeding into the Green UAS certification?
Yeah, we sure are. I think we are either finalizing drafting our application or have already submitted it. So yeah, we're very excited about Green UAS.
Great. And Eric, let me ask you the same question. What's your favorite feature or something that didn't come up in the discussion that you want to talk about with Airobotics?
I'd say the favorite feature is really the end-to-end system. It was incredibly difficult to do, and now that we've gotten this to the point where it's validated, that's obviously very exciting. And I would say the same thing with Blake. I mean, if you're in our shoes, you really want to make sure you are focused. The markets that we're addressing are just they're just massive. And there's no need to get too far afield because the opportunity in front of us is really significant. So it's really about focusing and delivering on all the work we've done up to now to get scalable technology out and doing all the good it can do.
Fabulous. Well, we're at the end of the hour, and I'm a little regretful about that because I feel like there's a lot more to talk about. Thank you both so much for being there. We have two very different, really important tools for public safety. You've got networked infrastructure throughout a city. The number was actually sort of stunning to me when you think about having more than 20 of these installations, right? But actually, they've removed all the phone booths now, so you got to put something there, right? Sorry, Blake, that's an old person joke.
I look like phone booth a little bit. Bring it back.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, where else is Superman going to change? But
we'll put a phone on our system. Yeah.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. So two really different applications, but really important for the public safety community. Please check out both of these companies. We've got, I guess, the most information about the Airobotics system would be on aerobotics.com or AmericanRobotics.com.
Exactly. Yeah. Airobotics.com is, in fact, we just updated the website, aeroboticsdrones.com, but you can get there from Ondas as well.
And lots to read about the Lemur 2 and also the Brinc ball. We didn't mention that. The Brinc ball is so cool. It's a cell phone in a ball that you can throw anywhere and it won't break, and you can establish communications. Read more about that, brincdrones.com. Thank you both so much for your time. Really appreciate it. So honored to have you both on the show.
I know this was fun. Thank you very much for having me.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Much appreciated.
So next month, emerging technologies. We have a couple of guests lined up to be announced later, and we will also be in the meantime at Charles.
The Drone Responders National Public Safety UAS Conference at Busch Gardens.
That wouldn't have rolled off the tongue for me.
Yeah, I got that when you kind of gave the finger to, okay, take that away. But thank you all for being able to do this. Again, we've got a lot of interesting things. Maybe next month you can also talk about maybe the Green UAS thing. What does it mean? What's it about?
Absolutely.
Because a lot of people are wondering about that. But as usual, Miriam, thank you so much for being the host, and Tim Martin for being the co-host. And this will be recorded. It will be on the Drone Life YouTube channel,
which is Drone Life TV. We've been around for 10 years, but somebody else took the name. Drone Life TV YouTube channel.
There you go. So you'll be able to see it later. Tell others about it so they can go look at it as well. And we will see you next month. And I'm Charles Werner with Drone Responders, and thank everyone for participating. We'll see you next month.